you've been net skeptical for a while now. You've been on our program all year warning about a potential slowdown in services. Did anything change your mind yesterday?
Not really. I mean, the only thing I'll say is Apple Arcade, I think, is really interesting. That if it takes off, and we'll see whether subscribers really sign up for it. But if it does take off, that could drive a little bit of earnings. We're calculating maybe as much as 1% to the earnings line. But the other services like TV Plus, we thought that the 1-year free subscription, the free trial, actually depletes the earnings contribution of that. And we already expected that to be pretty low at below 0.5% of earnings. So, from a services point of view, nothing's changing too much. We'll wait and see how Arcade does.
Yeah. For a long time, the bulls argued that you want to see higher ASPs. You want to see higher prices for everything. Now the bulls are starting to say, well, actually, this aggressive pricing on the downside is also good. Which is it?
Yeah, that bull case just keeps rotating around, doesn't it? But the pricing on the iPhone, the base iPhone, is attractive. And I think the fact that they've added that dual camera really makes that device the focal point for consumers looking forward. So that's a really interesting device now. And I would expect unit share to shift over toward that device pretty aggressively. And as that happens, of course, that's going to drag overall average ASPs down. And that isn't particularly good for the revenue line.
Yeah, Rod, if you like profits and you like volumes of options, this was an interesting presentation because, as we've talked about, when it comes to services, they did price things at $4.99. Apple TV Plus is going to have 9 shows at launch. Arcade is going to have 100 games, but games that people haven't played before because they're exclusive to Arcade. So if you're looking at that and looking at tariff questions about what happens over the next 3-4 quarters, how cautious do you have to be on Apple's margins?
How cautious on the margins? I think that you need to be, if anything, you've got tariffs weighing on the margins a little bit, but they'll probably pass that through in price to the extent that they need to. Remember, those tariffs are very complex, so there's a lot Apple can do to mitigate the impact of those tariffs. And NAND prices are coming down, so that's a tailwind to margins. So I don't think you've got to be very worried about the margins here. I think it's much more to do with what happens with that services revenue line and then what happens to those phone ASPs as that really attractive iPhone mixes in.
You think they'll raise prices mid-cycle?
Oh, no, I definitely don't think there's a lot of room to raise prices on the iPhone. I think we've all seen that price point is maximized, and what you're now seeing here with the iPhone 11 is that the price is actually coming down for the primary unit while that unit gets more attractive.
Rod, in terms of the iPhone lineup that was unveiled yesterday and those price points, is this enough to just stabilize sales here, especially as everybody waits and looks to 2020 and possible 5G?
Yeah, I think a couple things I'll say about that. I think that as you look at that price point, stabilized sales, you've got to ask yourself how elastic is the iPhone in terms of demand. And I think price elasticity here we've shown is with the high prices is not particularly high. So you're probably not going to get a lot more unit demand coming through as a result of that lower price. And in addition, what we've seen through the summer is Huawei taking quite a bit of share in China, particularly in July. So what Apple's doing is fighting to maintain share, not necessarily take share in a market that's stagnated, that's fully penetrated. Then as we look out into next year, I think what's really interesting and maybe not talked about enough is the fact that naming convention change. That gives Apple the ability to really differentiate between the Pro and the iPhone lineup, the iPhone being the main device that consumers will purchase, and then the Pro being the really high-end unit. As you roll to 5G, and that adds even more cost to the phone, you have the ability to give 5G to the Pro units, but maybe not to the iPhone unit. And I think that's probably what we're setting up for next year.